Dr. Shabir, welcome to Let the Quran Speak.
My pleasure to be on.
Now, some Muslims are wondering, is the COVID vaccine halal? Can you respond to that, Dr. Shabir?
Yeah, the question arises because people are worried maybe it contains pork gelatin, or some feel that it may contain some human fetal tissue in which it was first cultivated. And so for some of these reasons, and perhaps others, people are wondering, is this really permissible for Muslims to use?
So let's talk about the pork products first, gelatin, in fact. The major vaccines in Canada don't contain that gelatin. Although gelatin is often used to make vaccines, but they weren't included in the COVID vaccines. But let's say there is a vaccine that's developed for COVID, because many are being developed at this time, and one of them contains gelatin. Would that be permissible for a Muslim to take?
It'll be a matter of weighing the pros and cons, and sometimes we have to pick the lesser of two evils. Generally, if there is a medicine that is unquestionably halal or permissible for Muslims, and then there's another one of questionable or dubious origin, then it's a no-brainer. We're going to take the one which does not create any doubt or misgiving in our minds. But given the present circumstances, we can well imagine, with the world demand for the vaccines, to get them in a hurry so that we can defeat this virus by the grace of God, then we will have to use whatever is available and whatever is developed so long as, of course, we are weighing the pros and cons, and we're not deliberately flouting God's rules and going against moral principles that are dear to us. So it's always a balancing act. Now, as for, let's say, pork gelatin is in the only vaccine that's available to us is the one that contains the pork gelatin. Would that be permissible for Muslims in that case, given the dangers of COVID-19? So weighing the dangers on the one hand, weighing the disagreeable factors of the vaccine on the other hand, we'll have to make a judgment. So we can see that there are actually many permissions in the religion of Islam in terms of using products that the average person is not aware of. Like, the average person just thinks, okay, this is haram, and anything to do with this must be haram or impermissible. If it even smells like that, it must be haram or impermissible. But there is a difference between the average person and the expert in anything. If I have a problem with my car, I look at the parts and I don't know what to do, and I'm afraid to touch anything because I'm afraid that, if I pull the wrong wire, then I will ruin the thing more. But I take it to a mechanic, and the mechanic says, oh, that problem, it's a cinch. And they reach in, they touch exactly the right place, they fix exactly the right thing in a moment, and my car is back running again. So that's the difference between the layperson and the expert. The expert knows how to reach in and how to pinpoint where the permission lies for us. And the average person says, no, it's a total hands-off situation here. So when it comes to using things like pork products, there's a great deal of difference between eating a slab of pork meat on the one hand and consuming something which is now a chemical substance, even if it was derived from the pork meat to begin with. And Muslim scholars have made this distinction. In some classical books, it is mentioned that if a donkey falls into a salt mine, the donkey will become salt. And the salt is permissible for us to use, because there you're not eating the donkey, you're eating salt. And they've used the example of wine as well. Wine is prohibited for us to drink, but if the wine is turned into vinegar, then the vinegar is permissible. So now, when you look at the vaccine, you don't see any pork meat in there. It's just like a chemical concoction that it's a piece of medicine, a bit of medicine, and so the same prohibition does not hold. Of course, people may feel conscientiously that it's still from the pork product, and we don't like this, but that we don't like this is different from saying that it is prohibited or forbidden. So when we're weighing the two things, on the one hand, we have to save ourselves from danger. And it is a requirement in the Islamic faith to protect ourselves, protect our health, and protect the health of people around us and so on. So to get the vaccine is actually imperative. And on the other hand, the disagreeable nature of some of the content of the medicine, if it is so, then that does not weigh as heavily as the imperative to get the vaccine. So we must get it despite despite this disagreeable factor.
Mhm. Let's talk about the fetal tissue issue then, if you're finished with the pork
Yes, I think so.
subject.
Yeah.
So some people are concerned, and this is an issue for Catholics as well. I believe the Vatican has come out with a statement saying that it's permissible for us to use the vaccine even if it was made using fetal tissue. And so there was concern that it could possibly be used. There might be abortions that have taken place, and fetal tissue is used from those abortions. So is that a similar concern that Muslims have, Dr. Shabir, or should have?
We will have some concerns, but not perhaps as great as the concerns of the Catholic Church. In Catholicism, as I understand it, abortions are like totally impermissible from the get-go. In the Islamic faith, there is a little bit more scope for abortions, and that many interpreters of the Islamic faith have said that in the early stages of pregnancy, usually they say before 4 months, because at 4 months the soul is breathed into the body, then it is permissible for people to have abortions. And after 4 months, then it's still possible if the birth of the child will spell a fatal danger to the mother. So in that case, we have to preserve the original life, which is that of the mother, and forego the life of the fetus. That's after 4 months, and prior to 4 months, there is more of a wide permission given. Of course, on matters like this, Safia, there are always differences of opinion among the scholars, but mostly the opinions weigh heavily in terms of permissibility. And in modern times, the matter has become more complicated because we realize that the embryo becomes quite viable, not to survive on its own, of course, but we can see the level of development in the embryo after about 40 days old. So some have reinterpreted the hadith that forms the basis of the 4-month ruling to mean 40 days in total. So instead of it being 40 days plus 40 days plus 40 days, they interpret the hadith to mean 40 days, the 3 periods of 40 days referring to the same one period of 40 days, overlapping and looked at from different perspectives. So instead of 3 times 40 giving you 120 days and hence 4 months, they would tend to interpret that as 40 days in total. And so the permissibility would lie within the first 40 days of pregnancy in terms of abortion. But this whole discussion shows that there is a greater level of permissibility within the Islamic faith when it comes to abortion as compared with the Catholic faith. Now, the other aspect of this is that in Islamic law, we think about how directly you are as a contributor to the negative that we're looking at. So somebody may use a knife to harm another person, but you are the manufacturer of knives. So how responsible are you for the fact that somebody uses your knife to harm another person? Now, of course, if this is happening over and over again to a large extent, you will be alarmed and you might want to shut down your knife production business. But if mostly with good intention, you're producing knives for good use in the kitchen, and people are using it for this good purpose, then you shouldn't shut down your knife production operation just because some people are misusing it. So now, in the 1960s, scientists thought that this is the way to cultivate viruses by using human fetuses, and they actually started with 2 fetuses that were electively aborted. So this is where the Catholic Church finds a huge problem, because the election to abort is the problem. And then if we use the product that comes from that process, then we are somehow sanctioning the election to abort fetuses, which we cannot do. But now, in Islamic law, we will say, okay, that happened in the 1960s, and the medicines have been produced as a result of that. The
And they're
medicines
not using
themselves,
more aborted fetuses. They're using actually the cells from those
from the
initial,
original ones, which are continue to divide
Mhm.
and be useful to scientists. Now, by using the medicines now, we are not contributing to a greater level of abortion. We are just, going with the status quo. This is the situation now. Medicines are being produced due to some action that was taken decades ago, before some of us were even born, before you were born, definitely. And So we cannot be responsible for that. Now we have the options: take the vaccine, don't take the vaccine. If you take the vaccine, hopefully we are protected by the grace of God. We don't take the vaccine, then it looks like, we will be susceptible to the virus. We could transmit it to somebody else and so on. So the best way to defeat this virus is by taking the vaccine. And from an Islamic point of view, I do not see any harm in that. And the last thing I think that deserves to be mentioned here is that what scientists are informing us of is that the present vaccines do not contain any fetal content. The fetal material was only used as a kind of as a cultivating base in which the vaccines were developed.
Thank you for that explanation, Dr. Shabir. It was excellent.
You're welcome. If you enjoyed this video, click like and subscribe. And please donate to support our work at QuranSpeaks.com.